You're listening to the Galaxy Poet Podcast, a new digital platform centered around art, the creative process, and creative solutions to problems facing our world. I am your host, Jordan Ferreira. Let's begin. Welcome to episode 7 of the Galaxy Poet Podcast. My guest today is an incredibly virtuosic lead singer who has worked with artists as diverse as Yngwie Malmsteen, Journey, and most recently Sons of Apollo. He's someone that I greatly admire as a vocalist and artist, and I think he has an incredibly unique perspective on things like business and the entertainment industry, music, the shifting of culture and sort of rock's place in that. I think he's someone I'm fascinated to talk to about all these things. So I want to welcome Scott Soto. Jeff,
what's up, man?
Thank you very much for doing this, sir. I greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I think I owe you money for that intro. It's really kind of you, and I appreciate your kind words. I don't feel worthy, but thank you.
No, man, I mean them. We're talking a little bit before this, and I was mentioning that in preparation for this conversation, I revisited your catalog. And what really struck me was, the most recent releases with Sons of Apollo. For me, being familiar with so much of that like virtuosic component in music, whether it's from listening to things like Dream Theater or even like some of the 70s kind of, King Crimson, Genesis, Gentle Giant, all that stuff. What kind of really impressed me was that all of that stuff, virtuosic, like, the musicianship and the instrumentation, it was brilliant. But I really think the fact that you were singing on that project, you were singing on those records, and the sense of melody and like expression you brought, that is what made those albums so special, in my opinion. So
I appreciate that. And it's at first when I was invited to join this group, of course, I said yes to the invitation before even hearing one note or knowing one note of what I'd be singing. The band Sons of Apollo was derived from another project called PSMS, which was Portnoy, Sherinian, or Sheehan, whichever S came first, McAlpine, and Sherinian. So it was the four components were basically an instrumental outfit. And I got the call from Mike Portnoy and on my birthday, 2016, basically saying, we've had this thing, we've got 2 albums under our belts, we've done a bunch of live shows, etc. But the next album we want to put vocals on. And that's where the initiation to join them came from. There was no audition. There was no sense of, is there chemistry? Will there be chemistry? It was absolute respect and trust that Mike brought me into the fold without even knowing what I'd bring to the fold. He knew what I'd bring to it without knowing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And getting that kind of validation and respect from your peers, especially as you said, as you were rattling off a lot of the people I played with through the years, it truly is a validation to everything that I've done thus far, that I can just be invited into something that would be so important to the others without having sung a note. Now, it eventually evolved to Sons of Apollo because changing McAlpine out and bringing Bumblefoot into the band, that's one of the reasons why the band is what it is now. But it surely was, it was interesting because I've never been part of I've dabbled in prog, every band that I've been in, we dabble with time signatures and different things, but I've never been part of a prog band. I knew I had those, the certain, I guess, innuendos that are necessary to be a part of it, but not having that experience, I knew I had my work cut out for me. And the good thing about it, sorry to rattle off about this, good thing about it is they pretty much leave the straight stuff of all our songs for the singing. When it gets all complicated and the time signatures on the crazy instrumentation, that's where I basically lay off and they get to have their fun and bring all the kitchen sink stuff in. But when I'm singing, it's pretty straight ahead. It gives me a chance to really dig into, as you said, the melodic side of it, the emotional side of it, the dynamic side of it, without having to do the math, so to speak, and trying to find the one and staying on the one.
Yeah. And the thing, I completely agree. I think that's beautiful. And you bring this incredibly strong sense of like expression and this memorable melodic kind of, you bring all of the music and instrumentation into this context where like it's a very powerful musical statement because it has both the virtuosic elements and it's rooted in melody,
Yeah. And that's, that was important. That I'm sure that's one of the main reasons why they wanted me in the band. I actually, my band Soto was opening for the Winery Dogs in South America. We're doing Brazil and Chile with Winery Dogs, and that's where I'd met Mike through the years. We've been more acquaintances. I've known Billy Sheehan for like 30 some odd years. He was the one I knew the most in this, but Mike was basically on the side of the stage watching our set a lot. And I thought it was mainly because he knew Dave Z, our, God rest his soul, our former bass player. He was on the side of the stage. I thought he was watching because they're kind of buds and they were longer friends than we were. But he was actually scouting me. He was actually going, yep, I think this is the guy for the next step of where he was going to take PSMS, which, like I said, turned into Sons of Apollo. So again, it's a testament to the hard work. It's a testament to everything that I put into what I do melodically. The melody and the muscle are as important as the message that comes across in the lyrics. So Mike saw that and he brought me into the fold.
That's amazing. And to his credit, I think Mike is someone that he's impeccable at surrounding himself with, like the greatest consummate like craftsmen in working in music. He's a master at that.
He's intuitive. I one thing I've learned about working with Mike, he's very, very intuitive. And one of the great things about this band is he's pretty much the captain of the ship. And we give him that title. We allow him that title because that's one of the biggest questions I get, with all these contributors from so many different forces of the music world involved in this band. How do you keep the egos at check? And that's basically it. There should be only one main captain of the ship, and Mike is that, because we trust his instinct. I trust his instinct because he got me in the band without hearing one note. So that alone, he won my respect in help. He's basically choosing set lists when we're doing live stuff. He's choosing order of the songs and the albums, the artwork. He's really, really good with that stuff. And I do enough of that stuff with my other bands and my own things. So I'm happy to relinquish that stuff to somebody and let them take it, because I know it's going to be quality in the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. It must be like a great feeling to know there is someone who's going to handle that it's going to be done tastefully and artistically, and you can kind of just, that must be kind of a relief in some ways,
Well, yeah, and as I said, I've got my own bands, my own projects where I'm the one that's doing that. I'm the one that's in charge of that, or I kind of make myself in charge of that. So it kind of is nice once in a while to sit back and just be a part of something as opposed to being the driving force of it.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to bring up, and I could be wrong about this, but as I was listening to the latest releases from Sons of Apollo, it kind of struck me that the reason I thought it was so exciting and so cool and expressive is that, like I say, on the one hand, there was this virtuosic musical element at play and the interplay between all the musicians. And on the other hand, there's something in your vocal that reminds me almost of like influences that have nothing to do with prog. Like I heard, to me, it felt almost like influences from funk music or from soul music, and your vibrato, and like I started realizing like that I think is what makes it so special. So is that true? Is that like a fair assessment?
You nailed it right on the head, and I give you credit because I know of you as a very craftful musician yourself, and I love the intro that's rolling where you see all that hair. It's all gone now, but yeah. So I know that I can trust somebody like you to recognize that, and I've even overheard Mike Portnoy doing interviews where they're talking about my contributions to the band. He said, I think Jeff is probably the first one that's been able to bring soul, like R&B and soul black music, that style, into prog music. He says, I can't think of one prog singer or one prog band that has that influence. And again, because when they give me the straight beats and they give me something that's got a groove behind it or something I can really dig into, like syncopations and triplets, and those are the things that truly make black music pop. That's where it all comes from. Going back, I grew up with specifically only Motown, the Philly sound. My whole sound growing up until my very early teenage years, when I finally discovered rock, was only black music and soul music and pop music. To be honest with you, I couldn't stand rock and roll. I couldn't stand bands like Kiss and Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, when all my friends were coming to school with all the T-shirts of all these amazing bands. And to me, it was a bunch of noise because I was weaned on Earth, Wind and Fire, the Temptations, the Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
And so it wasn't until you had a band like Toto, where Bobby Kimball, you can tell he was weaned on the whole black music vibe. Steve Perry came along. He injected that whole Sam Cooke thing into Journey.
Yeah.
Lou Gramm from Foreigner, you can tell he was a black singer in a white body, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it was when they were incorporating that style into hard rock. That's when I finally found my niche. That's when I finally said, now we're talking. Now I can listen to hard rock music. Now I can listen to music that's got heavy distorted guitars because I hear these guys coming from my world, and that's where I finally discovered rock.
Wow. So that, yeah, that explains so much of like what I hear in the expression and the vibrato and sort of like
Mm,
there's an element and a component to your vocal performance on these Sons of Apollo releases that I feel like it's so unique and expressive, as I say. And I just think that to me is like the element that makes it so special. And of course, I think Ron Thal he's one of my favorite guitar players. I think he's a musical genius, and Billy Sheehan is a master. Arguably, I don't know, it's not even that much of an argument. Like perhaps the greatest bassist that's ever been, rock bassist.
yeah, yeah.
Certainly.
And it's
Portnoy,
funny.
amazing.
You normally get the at the end of most interviews, or at the end of most interviews I've done in the past, I'll get the, if dead or alive, can you name who would be the perfect band for Jeff Scott Soto to be fronting? And I used to come up all these different theories. I'd say, well, I'd get Prince on the bass, I'd get Nuno Betancourt on guitar, and Will Calhoun from Living Color on drums. I'd
Wow.
always come up with these crazy scenarios of my perfect band.
Yeah.
And now when I ask that question, I just basically answer Billy Sheehan, Ron Thal, Mike Portnoy, and Derek Sherinian, because I'm in the quintessential greatest band of all time in my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly understand you could say that. And I also think Sherinian I think he brings something really like larger than life and like, and that whole kind of like mythology thing that seems to be like an aesthetic for Sons of Apollo. I feel
Right.
like those moments of like really cinematic and mythical like layers
Sure.
of keyboard. I think it's this incredible collection of influences.
Well, Derek certainly knows how to bring forth the old school and the classic, but he's also doing it in a more I guess modern way. I don't know many keyboard players that run their keyboards, especially the lead synthesizers, through a Marshall amp with the distortion and the whole thing. When he plays solos, when I hear the first Sons of Apollo mixes, and I'm hearing like the solo sections for the first time, I'm boggled. It's like, is that keyboard? Or is that a guitar? Because sometimes Ron is playing something, it sounds like a keyboard player, and
Yeah.
then sometimes Derek's playing something, it sounds like a guitar player. And I'm like, Jesus, who's playing what on this?
Yeah. That's amazing, man. Yeah, I can certainly understand that. And
Yeah,
there's so much, ability in the band that it's probably confusing at some points. Like what is going on right now? But
yeah,
it's always done masterfully, which I think is
yeah.
important.
And I give 1,000% credit to what these guys are going for and what they were going for in this new outfit. And I couldn't be more proud to be part of it and to represent again. I'm the front man. I'm representing these four other guys that come from these walks of life that are larger than life. So given that responsibility, it's a huge thing for me, and it's a huge compliment, but it also is a huge responsibility at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a testament to how, not only how, professional you are, but also just how amazingly talented you are. I think that's what it is. But
Man, I'm going to go broke with all these compliments. I'm going to be throwing you 20s every time. I got to get a Jordan tip jar over here.
no money necessary. But yeah, just I kind of following that thread. Like I'm curious about what the creative process was like for creating these records, because there's so much going on, there's so much complexity. But as I say, there's this real sense of like melodicism. So what
Yeah.
was that like for you?
Well, the songs and the crafting of the songs start before I'm even in the room. I mean, the two times that they started getting the songs together, I was on tour. I couldn't be part of the process,
Right.
sadly and unfortunately. I would have liked to, and wouldn't necessarily change much. I think it would have just been just to be in the room and be part of the process would have been nice. But it truly does stem from a lot of Derek's ideas and a lot of Bumblefoot's ideas. Mike is pretty much he's like the puzzle master. These guys will come up these great ideas. They'll go over it like maybe 16 bars of something, and then Mike will say, "Okay, let's take 8 bars of that, and then another part. Wait, I got this other thing that might fit in there," and they'll say, "Well, let's go to that for 4 bars," and
Mhm.
he'll have like a chartboard or a chalkboard or whatever, and he's writing all these different things and taking the different pieces of the puzzle and crafting the songs from there. This is where the vocals go. This is where we turn into the five-headed monster that this band is, and this is where the big epic ending, and this is how they craft the songs. I get maps of exactly where my involvement is going to be after they've already done all of this. It
Right.
makes my job easier because they say you're going to be singing here. I think this is a chorus. I think, and this is where I step in later and get to complete my end. But a lot of that as well on the first album, especially, I sat in the room with Mike and Derek during the vocals. We were crafting and writing and chipping away and creating them right there on the fly as I was singing them in the studio.
Wow.
And the second album, they pretty much gave me the freedom to. I sat down in this exact home studio with Derek. We went over every song, and Derek would give me kind of a hum idea melodically. I hear this, or maybe this kind of thing with a syncopation, whatever. He leaves the room, and then I dive in and I just start chipping away at them one at a time. I send it to him. What do you guys think? I love that. Maybe that we can change, and we do it all together. It's really organic, and it's a very respectful process in terms of everybody knows what they want out of the song, and I have this conversation a lot with people. Opinions are subjective. Music is very subjective. So you try to not tell somebody their ideas suck. And I hope that they do the same with me,
Yeah.
because if I'm really personal, if I feel really strongly about something and somebody says, I don't like that, it can come across the wrong way. It can hurt somebody's feelings.
Sure.
So I like to work in an environment where we're crafting something, and if I do something, if they don't like it, I'd rather them say, "How about we try something like this?" Or, "Hey, try this instead, and let's see if we can see which one sticks better." And that gives us a chance. I don't want to step over anybody's toes musically either. It's kind of the same respect. You do
Yeah.
your thing, I respect it. I do my thing, you respect it, and then along the way, we can do little tweaks and things that make it sound a little closer to where we both fit.
Yeah. That's perfectly said, man. And what so then for your own records, like I wonder what is the creative process in terms of coming up with melodies or like, writing lyrics? Do you have a methodology or do you have like a way of doing it or is it just sort of does it change depending on what the project is?
A little bit of both. I used to think a lot more. I used to think, okay, I need a song about partying. I need a song about relationship breakup. I need a song. I used to think along those terms more when I was writing kind of, okay, I need subject matters for an album.
Right.
Now I hear the song and it pretty much dictates. It tells me what that song should be about. It tells me the theme, the attitude or the heaviness of a song dictates what it should be about, or the lightness or the emotion or the space of a song. It totally tells me what it should be about, and it really the same thing with my melodies. The melodies come first, and then obviously, depending if the melody's aggressive, I can't be singing about butterflies and picking flowers, and vice versa. If it's a delicate emotional melody, I'm not going to talk about screw everybody and I hate you all. So
Right, right.
you, I think that's just a natural process, a natural thought in songwriting. You
Yeah,
kind of let the music dictate where it's going to go, and from that the themes happen. Everything just happens more organically this way without thinking too much.
right. That's fascinating. So, yeah, for me, I guess it's a little different just because I feel like I try to narrow in on a methodology, and it appears the more I try to narrow in, the more abstract everything becomes. Because it's
Mm,
like the inspiration comes from so many different things. It's like it could be
yeah.
programming a drum beat, it could be playing a guitar riff, it could be any number of things. But that makes a lot of sense, to kind of have this strike this balance between those two,
Yeah.
methodologies. That makes a lot of sense.
I've heard some of your R&B soul dance kind of stuff, and I was shocked that you're that type of artist, to be honest with you. I remember I've always, when I saw the hair, it's the typical judge a book by its cover. I always thought you're just a long haired rocker guitar player. And then I was a few years ago, you played me some of your stuff. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know this guy comes from that world. And I got to throw it in. I got to throw in also, I think this is overall a sensibility, a musicality that comes from the Boston or the Massachusetts area. It's funny because there's an East Coast sound. That's a given. There's a West Coast and an East Coast sound, but there's a kind of Bostonian thing that's a separate entity. The bands from Aerosmith and Extreme and the Cars until Tuesday. There's something about what comes from the musicianship and the kind of environment and the Massachusetts thing it's a different world, man. It truly is such a cool vibe that comes from that area, from that kind of rural, and it's a testament to where you come from. And I love the way you guys think musically. You have such a smorgasbord of sounds, and it's never predictable. It's really cool.
Wow, I've never thought about it in that way. That's super interesting, and thank you. I mean, that's interesting. I never took the context of like the environment as
Yeah.
explaining some of those things, but that
But
interesting.
well, it's because you come from there.
Yeah,
You need an outsider to kind of come in and say, well, this is why the Massachusetts sound or the Boston sound or the Worcester sound, whatever the different areas from there, why it comes from. It has such a derivative of different elements that maybe a lot of others don't really get their vibes from, and
sure.
it's amazing. I mean, we could sit here and talk about a band like Extreme, for instance. Their influences are so wide and so many different things thrown into one melting pot of music. That's what
Right.
makes that band so special. Aerosmith was the same. We can go on and on and on about so many different bands and artists that came from that area. So I'm just throwing you into that loop because again, I thought you were just a shredding guitar player, badass. But then I heard this other side. It's like, whoa, damn, I like this.
That's amazing, man. Thank you. And I remember being very surprised, like, oh wow, he appreciates that. I thought maybe there'd be this thing of like, oh, this isn't rock or this isn't prog, but you were
Right.
like, you were one of the first people to be like, oh my God, I love this. And that meant a
Yeah.
lot at the time. Like, wow, this amazing singer likes it, you know?
Well, but that's because of the world I came from. We were just explaining that earlier. I came
Yeah.
from mainly an R&B soul background,
Right.
and then once I discovered rock, I started merging everything naturally over. I wasn't just inspired or influenced by the rock singers who'd done that. I was inspired and influenced by the things that I already had in my wheelhouse and kind of brought that in. So even somebody like Ingve, I was bringing a kind of a different way of thinking than a normal hard rock or heavy metal singer might. And I've been trying to brand my own path that way. The Freddie Mercury mentality of I want to do pop, rock, jazz, classical, disco, funk, soul, nostalgic. I want to do all of it, and
Yeah.
because I'm influenced by all of it.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I certainly hear, so many of those things that you mentioned that make you as a presence, as a vocalist, like stand out. So I think
Hmm.
that mission has been accomplished. So that's really cool.
Thanks, man.
Um, absolutely. So the other thing I really wanted to talk to you about this, like I've been asking people on the show about, COVID and some of the implications and how it's affected their relationship to creativity. Just to sort of gauge it against my own experience, because it's been very much um, a balance between, being discouraged to create and also utilizing like all this isolation and time to yourself to like
Yeah.
hunker down and create. So what has that been like for you?
Well, creativity for me is usually out of necessity, that I'm supposed to turn in a new recording, out of necessity that I've been hired for a session, or out of necessity that I just have to get something done. There's always something I have to get done, either for somebody else or for my own needs. In 2020, I was able to take a lot more on than I normally would have had time for, or normally would have even taken on.
Right.
Clearly, we had a new way of having to think, a new way of having to get by and get through 2020. And I just immersed myself into creativity. I said yes to a lot of sessions, a lot of things that challenge me musically, a lot of things like I said, I normally would have said, it's not really my wheelhouse. Well, I made it my wheelhouse. And I recorded probably, I'm not going to say I've done this amount of albums, but if you add everything I did in the course of 2020, it's probably like 6 albums worth of material.
Wow.
From that, I was able to really just channel so many different things that now I'm working with other people that are sending me things like, well, work on this if you feel it. Or I'm going to send you a bunch of stuff. Just pick out the ones that you think you fit the best or that really speak to you. And my reply to them is, everything speaks to me. There's nothing that doesn't speak to me because I, even if it's not in my wheelhouse, I want to challenge myself. I want to see what I could do to something like this that I normally wouldn't be given that opportunity. And that's turned into an outlet for me that I, again, didn't have before, didn't think I had before, didn't even want before. It's given me the channel of, I got to do something with this downtime, and I'm gonna make something really positive out of it, and that's what I've done.
That's awesome. That's a really, really, I think that's a powerful perspective to just say, like, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to, as you say, like, kind of extend my wheelhouse, right? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing. So then what, like, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Were you going to say
No, no,
something?
no. I was, yeah, I was. There were a few things that are released. I released the solo album last year, "Wide Awake in My Dreamland." I'm part of another project for Frontiers Records that it's primarily a studio project, and the album just came out on Friday. It's a band called Wet. I sang background for Joel Hoekstra, who plays guitar for Whitesnake, his second solo album. I did all the backing vocals, and again, I threw myself into the creative side of, instead of the normal thing of just connect the dots. I said,
Right.
no, I'm gonna do a little more than just connect the dots. I'm gonna try to give you something a little different than I normally would because I don't have the time. I'm rushing things, or my voice is kind of tired, so I'm just gonna get it done and get it out of the way.
Right.
And so, because I had this downtime, people are even telling me, "Oh my God, your voice sounds like you sounded like when you were in your 20s or early 30s." I just turned 55 in November, and that's a beautiful thing for any vocalist to hear, is that
Yeah.
you sound young again. You sound like you did before, and that's because of the downtime I had in 2020. But the downtime turned into standing in front of this microphone and just really honing into what I was doing, and I just had a blast doing all this stuff.
That's awesome. That's incredibly inspiring to hear. It's incredibly inspiring to hear from someone like yourself who's done so many different things, in the entertainment world and so many different projects, so many different albums and tours and to still be challenging yourself, to push yourself and kind of extend the vocabulary and lexicon of what you're doing, I think is
Thank you,
amazing.
man.
Absolutely.
And I think if I were a bigger or household name, if I were a George Michael, or it just in the sense of, I was so big I didn't have to worry about taking on so many things, I might have a different perspective. I think perspective comes from where your life is, and the fact that out of necessity, I need to work, I need to earn, and number two, I still feel that need and that hunger to keep channeling different things I haven't done. That, I think that perspective alone is where I'm able to still find that hunger, still find that yearning to be a student, to be somebody that can constantly learn and be able to grow as an artist. Because if I were, you know, if I was Paul Stanley or David Lee Roth, or one of the veteran artists who made a great living and just have more money than they'll ever need or ever know about, I probably wouldn't be immersing myself into the creativity side as I have been or have needed to be.
Wow. Do you think that success on that scale can kind of, in that same way, can kind of limit sort of the impulse to like create for the sake of creating and sort of like make you more afraid of like operate from a fear-based mentality of, oh, I don't
Mm.
want to do that. That's too outside. Maybe let's just do something closer. Like, do you think it can inhibit you in that way?
Of course it can. When you find something that works, when you find a formula that was able to give you a level of comfort in
Yeah,
life, you naturally just say, "Well, what is there more I need to achieve? What do I have to? Why do I have to challenge myself? Why do I have to try and up my game? I've already done the most I can possibly do at this point. I'm just going to ride it out." So naturally, you could end up in that way. I'm not saying any of the names I did
sure.
mention have, but
Yeah,
in general, I can see where that can happen, and I can still see where others feel like, I don't care if I've had 50 number one songs and 10 platinum albums. I still feel like I want to grow as an artist. I think it just depends on the individual. And I'm lucky enough to still feel at this age that I still have something to say and I still want to say something.
Yeah. No, you do. You certainly do, man. I mean, these recent releases are proof of that. Um, but following kind of following that same thread, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on COVID and the implications of a post-COVID entertainment industry. Because I hear a lot of different opinions, and I like to ask this of people in the industry that I respect, and I'm curious about their take because I think there's a lot of opinions that are sort of like, oh, once the vaccine is rolled in and the public is able to be vaccinated, things will go back to normal. When I feel like perhaps some of that is true, but I think there's going to be this overhanging paranoia about
Mm.
public gatherings, and I think the implications are more far-reaching than people may originally think. So, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, we can't think for others. They the same way they can't think for us. We're
Yeah,
talking about creating and being creative and trying to find new ways to express ourselves. And then you have your average Joe who buys your records saying, "I don't want you to create. I don't want you to try new things and experiment. I want you to give me what I'm used to coming from you." I
yeah,
can't think the same way for somebody I don't know that's listening to music or goes to concerts. I can't assume they're going to feel confident and comfortable the way they used to or we used to going to live gigs.
yeah,
So my opinion is strictly how I feel about it, how I feel about going to shows. I can't speak for somebody else. I
sure,
personally feel, I mean, the climate's changed so much. As quickly as we became isolated from one another, as quickly as we now come to, we're used to seeing masks and being socially distant. It's going to take that much more time to feel confident in being near each other. I know a lot of people that are they just screw it. I don't care. I'm so sick of this. I'll come and hug you. I'll come and hang out with you the way we used to. And then there are others who are really hesitant, even if you've had the vaccine or even if you've had the antibodies, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
So it's going to take a while for everyone to feel the same way as when you see an old movie or a classic NBA game on TV, and you see everybody's just climbing on each other, giving each other high fives and spilling beer and spitting all over each other. It's going to take a while to get back to that. I personally feel. I think there's going to be a real hesitancy for people to want to be that close to one another again, regardless of COVID.
yeah,
COVID it gave us a reason to kind of separate and rethink. Wow, Jesus, no wonder we used to get sick. No wonder we got colds and flus and all that so
yeah,
easily because we were so vulnerable.
yeah,
And now that the fact that we've been so isolated, I think the vulnerability is going to start being overcome by the fact that, oh, I don't even want a cold anymore. So I don't even want to be in that kind of environment anymore.
right, yeah. Right. I mean, that's my opinion as well, and I think, I asked that because I think, obviously for someone like me, I love going to concerts. I love performing. I would love for things to be normal again as soon as possible. But I think about the dynamic and as you say, like how quickly things shifted.
Mm.
It's going to take that amount of time to shift again. I think that's absolutely right. And yeah,
I think it's in general, behavior, human behavior is some things in life it can be instant to get used to and then to go back to how it was before it can take twice as long. And
right.
some humans are the opposite. It can take forever to get used to that. And once it's not like that anymore, they're like, oh, thank God, this is the way it used to be. So
Right.
it's, everybody's different. Everybody's got a different thumbprint. Everybody's got a different DNA genetic background. And so you can't expect everybody to have the same feeling, same thought once things are normal again.
Sure. Yeah, but I think it's interesting just to get your take on it because, that that scene, like the rock scene, the progressive rock scene, and doing these festivals and all these things like that you're a part of and you've been a part of, for quite a while. I feel like there's so much of what I'm about as well. Like
Right.
I love going to see concerts, as I said, and performing,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to just sort of have this awareness that like you know, this is sort of an uncharted territory, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just an interesting time, challenging time, and I feel like it's good to know that things perhaps for the better could change. Like perhaps art is going to come out of this situation where people are forced to be isolated and all these things that will be revolutionary. Maybe that's
Sure.
symptomatic of that. Do you think that's possible?
I Absolutely, and again, I'm trying to put a positive spin on all of this. We're all living through a historical time. In in my 55 years of living, I never thought I would be living through something like this, the way our forefathers or our parents or our grandfathers, whatever, lived through a world war or a plague or something like this. We I got to this point thinking I was going to kind of get to the end of my own life without something this crazy, this historical that's going to be remembered to the end of my grandchildren's time. It's going to be something that is always going to be looked back upon. And, you know, everything from 9/11 to the Vietnam War, this is as big, if not bigger, because it affected the world. It didn't just affect us as a society, it affected humans, it affected businesses, it affected cultures and traditions. So much has changed because of this, so we're all going to change because of it, and that's how I see it. But from that, if you constantly think about the fact that you can be put some kind of positive spin behind it and get something positive out of it, as opposed to everybody walking around, oh, 2020, what a crappy year. Oh, thank God it's gone. No, look at the positive side of what it brought and what you can actually turn it into yourself. And that's how I see it.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's important to, yes, challenging in many ways 2020 was,
Mm,
but I also think like it gave people an opportunity to like reflect in a way that
yeah.
maybe they haven't in a while. I think that's very
And
positive.
it's funny because, when I was doing interviews even for my solo album, I would say like the middle or the 3rd quarter of 2020, one of the main things was brought up was the fact that we had to end we started the European part of the Sons of Apollo tour. We only got 4 shows deep before we decided, "Let's pack it and go home."
Wow.
We saw it was starting to affect upcoming shows on that run, on top of it was affecting other bands in other cities and countries.
Right.
It was like we were living it live when we were sitting in Germany watching Milan getting ready to shut down, and then Spain was next, and Paris,
Wow.
and all these places. So we're like, let's get home while we can, because they might shut all borders. We might be stuck in an army hospital somewhere for Lord knows how long. Let's just get home and ride this out. So a lot of the interviews were about that, and about the fact that how do you feel that you actually named your album 2020. And in the beginning, I used to joke saying, "Well, yeah, it's 2020 with the Roman numerals, but so let's just call it MMXX from now on, as opposed to 2020." But now, you know what? I personally feel that because there are a lot of reflective lyrics on that album that ended up actually relating more towards the year that we had. I was almost like I foresaw what the year was going to be like. It's like, you know what? That actually the lyrics and the content really dug into what we actually lived through. So I'm actually proud that that album represents the year 2020, because it was supposed to just represent the next decade. It's supposed to be the one of the first albums of the new decade of the 2020 going into before we get into 2030. And that's one of the reasons why Mike wanted to call this album 2020. But as
Wow.
far as I'm concerned, a lot of the lyrical content really dug into what a lot of the things that we dealt with, and even I dealt with psychologically or therapeutically.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It truly is a testament. It's a kind of a timestamp of that time.
Wow. That's amazing. It must be surreal now to read some of those lyrics and be like,
Oh
wow.
God, yes. I can and you know what? It's going to be surreal even to sing them now, because
Yes.
one of the things we keep this everybody keeps asking, you know, is there a new album in the pipeline? And I the answer to that is not really, because we didn't really get to do the cycle for that album, the touring cycle.
Yeah.
I don't think it's in anybody's interest to go out with a new album and just kind of forget about that one. There's
Right.
a lot of great material there, and if you do a third album, it's going to shorten your set list of the first 2 albums more. And
Right.
on that album, on that tour, we were doing. I think there was only one song on that we were missing from 2020 or from MMXX.
Wow.
There was only one song that we didn't do live, but the rest of it was that album. So I would feel, oh man, I feel cheated that now we have to cut things off that, because now we have to do more material from the new album. And
Right.
I think we all kind of feel that there's unfinished business. That's one of the reasons why, instead of focusing and concentrating on a new album, we still have our unfinished business to go back out and tour for the MMXX album.
That's great to know. I mean, I was actually at the California show right before I think the
Yeah.
right before the tour was canceled, and it was one of the best like one of the best progressive rock shows I've ever seen. It was amazing.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's always weird playing home. I think you were the first one too. I think you
Yeah.
came to the one the first tour as well.
Yeah.
And that's it's always interesting when you go out with a new band for the first time and the wealth of the material you're doing is your own. It's all new material. You got to go out there and you kind of have to feel it out to know what you're going to be able to do with it before it turns into second nature.
Right.
And all my JSS tours, for instance, 75% of the songs I'm doing are from my past, and then you'll do like 25% of the new stuff. So, oh, I don't know where to move here and what to do here, but you don't worry about that as much because you know you're going to be skating through the other stuff.
Right.
When Sons of Apollo first went on tour, I'm like, oh my god, I have no experience. What do I do here? How do I move here? Where do I go there? What do I say here? And so it was a total learning curve on that first tour. By the time we got to the second one, it just eased right in. Even though it was all a lot of new material, when we were doing the songs from the first album, it was like, I can breathe now.
That makes sense. That must be quite a challenge, to kind of
Yeah,
so quickly, and suddenly there's 2 albums worth of material, and then
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. But I'm wondering, like, for you, even in your own solo music, or whether it be Sons of Apollo or any of the projects you work on, what is your process like for lyric writing? Like, do you have a particular methodology for lyric writing?
Again, because the songs pretty much dictate what the songs are going to be about.
Right.
My method is I always write in double entendre. I've been doing that for probably about 25 years now. And all my lyrics, there are songs that would blow your mind what they're actually about compared to what you might think they're about. There was a song I kind of started this ideal. I'm gonna say it was mid 90s. I think it was an album. I was in a band called Talisman, and we're doing an album, and I was writing a song. We were writing a song for that album, and it ended up being a song called Madison. And when you read the lyrics, it talks about this my little girl. She's rambunctious and wild, and she makes me crazy. I try to tame her, but she makes me want to just throw her out to the wolves. And it made it sound like, oh my God, what a tumultuous relationship Jeff was in.
Right.
And I was like, no, Madison was my golden retriever puppy that was almost hard to tame. And she was rambunctious and wild, and I couldn't tame her. I basically, I got so frustrated, just want to throw her out to the wolves. And when I would have never thought that song's about a dog. So when I got that attitude back from people thinking it was about a relationship, I thought what an interesting way of writing. If you can write about something that's about something completely different what people might perceive it as, and as long as you don't tell them, they're going to continue thinking it's about that. Double entendre way of writing lyrics is for me. It gives me something more to challenge the lyric itself with, as opposed to being, you write a lyric like, I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. You're not going to be talking about rocket science. You're not going to be talking about saving the world. You're talking about partying and rock and rolling.
Yeah.
But when I write, especially Sons of Apollo, I really dig into the double entendre side of things. There's some things that might be about a political or a racial situation. That's what I mean with the song, but I'll write it in the context of a relationship between two people, or whether it's a man or woman, or about you and their boss, or a former boss, or the way somebody treated you. Yeah. Or I could take a bully situation and do the same thing. The way you treat me, the way I want to take my vengeance on you, but it's actually about something else completely different, and you wouldn't even know which one I'm talking about just from reading the words.
Wow, that's very interesting, man. This is really, really cool. So is there any particular like medium that you get inspiration for your lyric writing from? Like whether it be, are you reading a lot and kind of drawing inspiration from that? Are you watching films a lot? Like any particular medium that inspires you in that way?
It's mainly other music. It's mainly
Okay.
new music, for instance.
Okay.
A lot of things become dated based on being classic. If something's from a classic time, if something's from the 80s or the 90s, it's considered classic by the time it gets to the here and now. So you try to tap into the way other people are approaching their way of their methodology behind the writing and how they write and their messages. When you hear a lot of current songs nowadays, you're hearing people using the social media platforms. They're talking about, you write a lyric about Twitter and you're writing a lyric about Facebook, and you're using a lot of the terminology that's in today's society. If
Right.
you're not using that, and that's going to date you in 20 years, it's going to date you as well, because it's going to make you think about this time.
Yeah.
So I try to just utilize how other people are approaching their lyrics and their style now, so I don't sound dated. So I don't sound like I'm just stuck in a time capsule or a time warp.
Yeah. That's that's very smart. And I think unfortunately there are many artists that I think don't think that far ahead. And it's sort of
Mm,
like as a result of that, they do get time stamped to that particular era, you
sure.
know? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
you want to be able to say something and it means something, as opposed to just doing it because you have to fill a line or kind of connect the dots. And
sure.
it's, I always try to put a little more effort, I guess, into my lyrics, instead of just saying, well, I'll just write this because I need to get it done.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean that's super cool. Um, yeah, so what I want to ask you about now is sort of like I've been speaking about this to different guests on the podcast about like as it relates to music. It seems to me now that I could be turning on the radio in Los Angeles or Boston or wherever it is that I am, and I could turn on a rock radio station, and effectively what I'm hearing is dance music.
Mm.
I could turn on a pop radio station, and it's effectively dance music. Like there seems to be this synthetic component where like heavily programmed drums are essential, and like a very particular kind of vocal processing is essential, and I
Mm.
guess what it makes me think of is like do you think these elements are going to further seep into every genre of music, and that's just going to kind of be the next evolution? Or do you think this is representing a bit more of like a fad, of escapism or something like this?
Music, again, I'll bring this up every time. Music is subjective.
Right.
Styles are subjective. Styles are signs of the time. So clearly, you have to have fads. You have to have change. You have to have evolution. You
Right.
have to have things that try different avenues, and then the powers that be, the record companies, the record executives, the A&R people, they're looking for the next big thing.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the same thing that we've already had. This is why genres change, genres shift, and this is another thing. It's so hard to keep up with the Joneses. It's so hard to say I'm going to be progressive, alternative. I'm going to always think next level, next generation. You can't. All you can do is, if you're influenced by it, you like what you're hearing, you can adapt that to what you're doing. But by following fads and following changes, I think that's the worst thing for any artist to do. And I've seen a lot of artists basically nosedive because they're doing exactly that. The
Yeah.
best artists take the best of what the changes are and the fads are, and utilize those, but stay true to who they and what they are. And this is what I try to do with myself all the time. Whenever I try, my band Soto is a case in point. It's a heavier, it's more modern metal sounding than everything else I do.
Right.
And a lot of my fans are in their 50s, late 40s. They already have an idea of what they want Jeff Scott Soto to sound like.
Sure.
So when I try to do something a little different, and I try to basically tap into some of the things that I'm really enjoying about modern music today, everybody thinks I'm following the bandwagon. And it has zero to do with that. It has everything to do with, I just don't want to be stuck in one thing. I want to be able to show the different colors, the different sides of what I have to offer as an artist. But also,
Right.
I want to be able to do that to myself, give that luxury to myself, to be able to grow as an artist and not just stay doing one thing. So it's difficult as hell to try and please everybody while still kind of honing in and kind of adding to your arsenal. And that's regarding your question, fads have to come and go. Changes and evolution have to come and go. But something about rock and roll, there's always a kind of recycling channel. There's always a level of a rebirth, so to speak. A band like Greta Van Fleet, for instance, is bringing back the old Led Zeppelin sound of 50 years ago. And
Yeah.
they're doing it in a big way because that music still exists. People still want that music. And when a new band, a bunch of young kids comes out and does that kind of music, all of a sudden it's looked upon as fresh and exciting again.
Yes.
If a bunch of dudes my age come out and do a new album that's like that, it's going to be expected. That's, you come from that era. Clearly, you're going to be doing something from that era. So this is why it's important for young musicians who listen to their parents' music or their grandparents' music to not be afraid to bring those elements back into music. Michael Bublé is another one. Michael Bublé is doing music, a total throwback of the Sinatra era, the Tony Bennett era. And he's the king of it right now because there's nobody really chasing that arena.
Right.
And he's basically owning that arena. And so it just shows that somebody young can bring back something of yesterday as long as they have their own spin on it, not just trying to emulate exactly what was already done. And I just think music's just going to be a constant cycle of rechanneling and recycling, and fads will come and go, but fads will also add to that recycling and rechanneling.
That's beautifully said, man. I agree with you. I agree with you. Do you think rock is due for a rebirth in the mainstream?
I'll always say it is,
Right.
especially because you brought up, you can turn on any radio station, any given radio station. The only ones that are playing rock are the classic rock stations. You don't really hear classic rock being channeled into any mainstream music right now. So clearly, yeah, it absolutely needs to be. It needs to have that reboot. Will it be the same as the '80s? The whole hair metal thing. I don't think so. Will it be the same as the '70s heyday of the hippie movement or the Led Zeppelins and the Who's and the Doors? I don't think so. But it always needs to keep that element of where it came from as part of where it's going.
Right. I I think that's really profound. I mean, honestly, so much of the reason why I started this particular like platform and to speak to inspiring guests like yourself is I think there's a major disconnect between
Mm,
like the contemporary music model
yeah.
and um I just think some of the options that artists have now at their fingertips to explore things like distribution and sort of building their own kind of audiences and kind of just selling directly to fans, like it's a new landscape.
Mm,
So I'm wondering, like, because you're someone that I have so much admiration for, and I think you're incredibly talented, and you have a lot of wisdom because I think you've certainly had experiences like many people that tumultuous situations with business,
mm,
and it's a crazy business. So,
yeah.
um, but yeah, I'm wondering, like, could you impart anything that you think would be valuable to, say, a 16-year-old like aspiring artist that maybe is looking to do something?
I love and I hate that I came from the tail end of how things were in the
Okay.
music business, from the lavishness of being signed to a major label, the big tours where the label puts a lot of money behind a video and the tour support. I come from the tail end of when that was still existing to the beginning of it completely going away, the era of the MP3 or the the streaming end of things. We had to relearn how to do everything. A new artist, a young artist, is already growing up with the post iPod era. They're coming up. They're here for the Spotify era. They're going to know how to get their band and their platform going based on the fact that they lived it before they became a part of it.
Right.
We had to throw everything that we already knew on how to do things and learn how to do it the new way, to be able to adapt and be able to move on. And it stinks to have all that knowledge of how we used to do it, and how I was so used to doing it a certain way, and then I had to throw away all that experience and all that wisdom away and learn how to do it in the new way in order to survive.
Wow.
Um, it's a blessing and a curse because obviously I can still live through the ideals of how we did it. I can still live through the ideals of you go out there and you play every club, you play in front of every person that you can possibly play in front of, and that's how you build and gain your audience. And then I also learned the other way of, well, now I have social media. I've got a platform. I don't need a label. I could just put my stuff out there and just keep pushing and promoting it and trying to share it with other people that way. It's so strange to come from both worlds. And I even lose track of what I'm trying to say, make my point here, but it truly is frustrating to not be able to utilize all the knowledge that I felt I was able to gain, especially because, like I said, I started my career in 1984 professionally with Yngwie Malmsteen when I was 18 years old. So from the age of 18 until I'm going to say 30, that world still existed before the Napster came along, before the MP3, before the peer-to-peer sharing thing came along and changed the whole structure and the whole platform of how things had run. So now it's, as much as it's a great thing for a lot of young artists to be able to have those different platforms and different ways of doing it, there's still something to be said about how it used to be done that a new artist could actually have benefited from, instead of being part of the hundreds and thousands of other bands that are doing it the same way. There was still something to be said about, out of 100 bands, there's only 2 of those bands is going to be taken and plucked and given the full support and put into superstardom. It doesn't work that way anymore. It barely exists anymore. It's really luck of the draw these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. In the contemporary scheme of things, where like you're going through a major label system, it absolutely is. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like you could have all the talent, and if you don't have the look, or if you don't have the aesthetic, they're not gonna pick you. You know,
Yeah. In
if
the
you
old
have the
days, you
look.
could, yeah, in the old days, you could say, I got a major record deal. That was already leaps and bounds from the other bands that you're playing with and, playing the clubs with and all that. You
Yeah,
finally had that chance. Now, whether that's going to be given you're going to be able to take that chance and run with it, that's you can't predict that. But the fact that you were able to, you beat all the odds and you finally got that deal. Now, what to do with it? Nowadays, what deal is there? What labels are there? What platforms are there? You're basically at the same level with everybody, and you get this one person who geniusly comes up with a way to promote themselves and get their platform out there.
right.
It makes you have to think a lot harder on how to get yourself out there than you used to have to do it.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for someone, let's say a new artist who's looking to build like an alternative model? Maybe it's through, building a YouTube channel and just sort of like approaching it like a direct to consumer kind of thing, where they have a creative work, they build their channel, and then they just sell, directly to their audience with no middleman or something like that.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't really have advice, and I really don't have that directive in general, because I guess I've kind of turned a blind eye to it. I really don't want to know that world. I kind of leave
Sure.
that to the people who know how to work that angle and how to push that angle. And me personally, I wouldn't know the first place to start. So the only advice I can give to anybody is, if you don't have that experience, is to surround yourself with people who do. Because if you don't, you're gonna have to pay for those people to do it for you. But if you have people who know those directives and know how to utilize them, surround yourself with them, because they're gonna be your best friends. They're gonna be your biggest allies out there to kind of help you push forth.
Yeah. Wow. I've never heard anyone say that, but that is like of paramount importance. And it's
Hmm.
so true. It's so true. Like, especially now, because the social
Yeah,
media presence is so, it's like in many ways more important than whatever you sound like. It's like if you don't
yeah,
have a presence,
absolutely.
you know, it's,
And through the dawn of time, through that to every step and generation of music that I've listened to, you're always gonna walk away saying, "How did that song become a hit? How did that band get a break? That's crap. That's awful." But you know what? There was a science behind it. There was somebody that knew what to do with it and how to do it, and that's how I got there. There's
right.
it's not always about how good somebody is or how good the song is. In the end, that's again subjective. We can both just kick ourselves in the heads trying to come up with the perfect song. Ain't
Right.
gonna mean anything if nobody hears it.
Right. Right. And especially, it's so important for people to hear that now, because the promotion angle is like, it is creative in some ways. Like, you
Mm,
see people like Lil Nas X who, you know, I mean, I admire some of what he's done as a strategy. Like, he actually launched his single as part of like a video gaming like stream that he did. And then
yeah,
all the gamers saw it and they started retweeting it, and it suddenly became
exactly.
this phenomenon.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's amazing how, again, that's why I could never give advice, because my advice might be either outdated or totally irrelevant. It's amazing what you can do and what can be done to actually gain success and to gain notoriety over what you think it might be the way to do it or the approach to do it. You can pay somebody to help you get subscribers on a YouTube channel. Is that going to get you enough people to do what you're actually setting your course to do? Not necessarily. It
Right.
might help, but it doesn't. There's no guarantee. So you got
Sure.
to come up with, I guess that is my advice. You got to come up with something that hasn't been done that can appeal to the masses and not appeal to them like I love this, but appeal to them in the sense that they can't deny it. It's in front of them no matter where they go. And that's the trick. That's the key to getting your stuff out there. Because again, a great song is it's only great if people hear it.
Right. That's profound advice, man. I think that's an inspiring note to finish the podcast on. And I want to say genuinely thank you for your time, man. I admire you so much and I greatly
Thank you,
appreciate it.
brother. I'm so happy you're doing something like this. It's different than your normal average podcast where you're just talking about and somebody's just blabbing about themselves and their new album and notice me, recognize this. We get to talk about insights that perspectives, and I think that's more important. That's more fun to talk about than just talking about what a great song this is.
Absolutely. And I think you're someone that has so much like insight into entertainment that it's fascinating to talk to, man. I'd love to have you back on if you'd like and
Absolutely.
awesome, man. Be safe. Thank you again.
All right, Jordan. Thanks for having me, and best of luck with this thing. I love that you're doing this. I think it's going to be important to a lot of artists that you bring on here that can offer their perspective in this way.
Wow. Thank you, man. Be safe. I appreciate it.
All right, you got it.